Let's get started on this lantern. Now, one thing I already know about this, we've got a neat two-part vent. This sometimes happens if it gets rusty or if it wasn't tacked together well enough. I suspect that in this case it's a combination of both. It's not that rusty. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. It doesn't affect functionality. It's just kind of an annoyance when you go to take it apart. You could probably weld that with some tacks back in place, but I expect you'd end up damaging the porcelain in the process. So it's not really worth the trouble. There is no high heat epoxy that I can imagine that would be able to handle the temperature that this valve gets, or that the vent gets. So I'm not going to even try to epoxy that. Now, these are held together by this nut. At the beginning, I haven't done anything with this. So, and now all of this should just come off. There we go. We'll come back to that. This is really crusty. So far, nothing's particularly tight. Uh-oh. Oh, good. For a minute, I was worried we were missing our cleaning needle, but it is here. And it's even still got the needle on it. That's good. Set that aside. Let's off. There we go. Now, this actually looks like someone may have, oh, it's in there nice and solid. It looks a bit like someone may have tried to pull the packing out. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it alone. Yeah, these are not easy to find. They haven't been made in a long time, so I don't want to mess with any of this stuff inside. Plus, it's probably asbestos. So now our collar just rotates off, and yeah, this definitely has been repainted, I can see. And we'll take our valve knob off. I always forget. I should probably want that nut or that screw in there to get this off. Let's see. Sometimes you need that screw in there so you can pull this out, but that one came out nice and easily, and our graphite packing looks great, so I'm glad to see that. Let's take care of the fuel cap while we've got this on. I'm going to make sure this is nice and tight so that the insert, the rubber gasket grabs and the insert doesn't spin when I try to unscrew this. This a little bit of rock. That rubber gasket's really stuck on there. I will replace this. I won't show you the process. I've got a video on that, and there's a link up above. Now let's take out the pump. Like I said earlier, this hexagonal pump handle dates this to about 1956 to 1960. If it were round, it'd put it at about 1955, maybe 1954. And out it comes. There's still some nice oil on there. And there's a nut. I'm going to try to take that off. On the stove it was tight, on this it was loose. Off. So now it's interesting, the stove had the little brass circular insert or spacer in there, and this simply has a washer. All right, now the fun part, the valve. This might need heat, but we'll see. At least it's a steel fount, so I'm sorry I'm going at the wrong angle for you here, I guess. But no, that was actually really easy. I don't think anyone's ever taken this apart. It certainly doesn't look like it from how dirty it is, but usually they're a lot more difficult than that. So here's our fuel and air tube. As far as I know, these are soldered on. I think the last one I worked on, it seemed to be soldered on. This one's unscrewing. Does look like there's solder on there, but that's good because I'd like to make sure everything's clean inside. You see all that dust? And this just unscrews. Grab it with pliers. Similar to a Coleman. Needle is much thinner. This is all crusty. I'm glad we got that apart. And we could take this, I'll go ahead and take it off. I don't recommend separating these two nuts. The graphite packing is in there, and there isn't really any good reason that you need to replace or get in there unless you need to replace that packing, and I'm not even sure that that's replaceable on these. And then we've got our eccentric block. So that's everything there. The last thing we need to do is take this guy apart. This is our air tube. This is, some of these are threaded. This actually looks like it's threaded, but sometimes they're crimped, and I'm just going to leave this well enough alone. We can get everything as clean as we need to get it the way it is. Take the bottom plate off. Little tiny nuts on here. Once they're loose, because of the needle nose pliers are actually a little easier to get in there once they're loose. And then you can get your fingers in. These are brass, so when you put it back together, don't over tighten them or you'll split them open because they're so small. Ask me how I know. Trying to get a grip on it in here is always easy. Okay. Sometimes it's hard to tell if it's rust and gunk in the threads or if it's just my gloves getting in my way. No, those threads are just all gunked up. That'll come off now. That's still tight. All right, base plate off. Right, now on these, the burner cap is not a separate part. Let's get this remnant of a mantle off of here. Go ahead and take these nuts off. This is interesting that they're screwed all the way up. Usually they're somewhere about in the middle. That makes it easy to put it back together, because you want to, before you take apart one of these AGM designs, you want to take note of where those screws are so that everything's the right height when you put it back together. And these supports may or may not unscrew easily. They really don't need to come out of the manifold to do a full cleaning and all on this. These threads are really gummed up. Even at the very end. I suspect these are going to be difficult about coming out. Well, maybe not. Sometimes they're rusted in there badly. If we can get that out. Usually when they're this crusty, they don't come out that easily. All right, that's all of that. Now this tube we need to get out, mainly because when we put it back together, we may need to adjust the height on this. So try to get this screw out without it breaking. So far everything else has been good, so that's good. And this looks like it's probably stuck, or not. That little screw was just holding it nice and tight. So there we go. That's everything. Other than the vent stud, that I wouldn't worry about. That most likely, if you try to take it off, there's a really good chance you could shear it off, and it's just not worth the trouble. We can get to everything we need inside there. So I'm not going to go any further. So there we go. Degreaser and water. Well, this will be degreaser and water too. A little bit of stuff in there. Doesn't sound too bad, but we'll clean this. I'm pretty certain this is not the original paint. If it were the original paint, it should look like this. It doesn't. Also, the way it's flaking off doesn't look like what the original paint would do, and there's no decal anywhere. So this actually looks like it's probably a good candidate for a wire wheel to get this off. I expect it's going to come off pretty easily with a wire wheel, especially I can see it's all peeling up on here already. And all of these, might try electrolysis on this. The problem with the wire wheel is I don't want to sand down too much on the collar. So anyhow, the rest of these parts will go in citric acid. So we've got our nifty two-part vent here. We just need to clean this up. All I'm going to use is some Simple Green and water. Bottom half done. And the top half, that's it. If we had a globe, I'd do the same thing with it. We don't have a globe. We'll have one for it, but we don't have one now. All right, once again, making lantern soup. Got brass parts over here, steel, nickel parts over here, about a teaspoon of citric acid powder per liter of water, and this will remove grease, corrosion, pretty much everything, and then we can polish it all up. I'll hit it with some 4/0 steel wool in the sink first and then take it to the polishing wheel. All the parts are coming out of the citric acid, so they will get rinsed, and I'll rub them down with steel wool. Some of them may get some wire brushing done, but they've got all the rust mostly removed, and now it's just time to clean everything up. I don't know if this is some kind of plating or if it's paint or what. A lot of cast iron parts are coated in this. And it isn't very durable. Usually stove manifolds and burners and that kind of thing. You can spray it with high temp silver paint, like barbecue paint, but it never quite looks the same. Here's our valve. It's pretty nasty. Generator. Because this has that packing inside, I'm going to put this in the oven just to make sure it's completely dried out before I put it back into service. Because with that packing inside, it's going to take a really long time to heat up the first time I try to light up the lantern if I don't dry that out. Alright, I'm going to polish up all of our metal parts here, or at least the ones that need polishing. Using a cotton buffing wheel, and I know I need to get more. Last time I went to the store they were out with this white polishing compound that I'm almost out of. Here's our valve. Pump handle. Let's strip this fount. I've been having good luck on steel founts with this wire wheel, especially this little cupped one. We've got a couple of others as necessary, and I think because this paint's already so flaky, it should come off pretty easily. Brass founts, I may not do this. They're a little more delicate, but steel founts that's a good candidate, and it also smooths things out. I don't have to sand as much. So I've got an old jacket on with long sleeves to keep the dust off my arms, and I'm going to put on a dust mask here, or a respirator here. Let's go. All right, that gives you an idea of just how easily that works. We'll continue. I think that's going to be good enough. I'm going to put this in citric acid just to make sure the inside's clean and everything. And the check valve wasn't quite sealing, so I did manage to get that out and have got it working properly now. So yeah, that's good for the fount. All right, now that the fount is stripped and I let it soak in some citric acid, there were a few little spots of paint left, a couple little things here. So I want to sand this, make sure I get all of that off, and just make sure it's all smooth and prepped for primer. So I'm going to start with some 400 grit, and then I will go on to a 1000 grit and do some wet sanding. Sorry, forgot to start the camera there. Got a little bit of primer on there, but here goes our first coat. All right, I'll give that a few minutes, come back and put a second coat on, and I think that should be good. I think that should do it. That's 2 coats of primer. I'm going to wet sand this with some 1000 grit sandpaper, also the collar. And again, I want to be careful not to over sand this because the paint starts to fill in the stamping, and I don't want to lose that stamping as I get more coats of paint on here. This is just a light sand to clean off any nibs or roughness. Right, that should do it. Just clean it all up. All right, now I'll let these pieces dry. So we'll be ready for the color coat. right, it says to do 2 light coats a few minutes apart and then 1 medium coat. So I'll give it about 5 to 10 minutes and come back and we'll do a second coat. All right, I'll give that another 5 to 10 minutes and we'll put on the final thicker coat. And on to coat number 3, this will be a bit thicker. Let's get this lantern reassembled. The first thing I'm going to do while my hands are clean, I usually do this at the end, but I realized that's silly. My hands are dirty, then I have to go wash them or take my gloves off. So I'm going to put this sticker on. The originals were water slide decals. Nobody makes those, but Old Coleman Parts sells these reproduction stickers. They're vinyl. They seem to be good quality. I've used them a number of times. So it goes on this side, filler cap on the left, pump on the right, and I just want to get my spacing figured out. I've just taken a little pencil mark here to mark my center line, and that's about it. So I'm going to, I think, stick down the last time I did one of these, I started with the end and I didn't get it quite straight. So I think if I start this way, so that's centered. I think that's straight. And if we just peel this back and slowly work it on. These are fairly thin and they can crease fairly easily. Sorry, that's in your way. I think I just put a little bit of a crease there. Didn't quite get straight either. Let's see if this is done for or not. I think maybe now I've got it straight enough. Trying to put it on around the curve didn't work. So I'll try it this way and we salvaged it. I'd be annoyed if I wasted a sticker. Well, it didn't get quite straight, but you know, they weren't always straight from the factory, so c'est la vie. But I think that still looks pretty good, and once it's down, actually, it's not quite so obvious. Yeah, it's just a pain to order these from Old Coleman Parts because they're in the States and shipping is expensive to get up here. So now let's start with our fuel valve. So make sure that the nut is tight here. And that's too tight. That's pretty loose. We may just need... Oh, it was already open, that's why it was tight. This is our direction disc with the directions worn off. Is that it? There we go. Now, to put this back together, at least for starters, we want our air stem or air wire and our fuel and air tube and our pickup tip, and there's a spring here somewhere. There's a spring. Put that through, and we'll put this tip on. Feed that in there. The spring works well, and I can see it's poking through the hole, so that's all good. There. And just snug that up a little. And while we're at it, let's put our eccentric block back in. So this groove is what interfaces with the actuator here. And then this claw is for our cleaning rod. So we'll just drop this down in. And with any luck, if we go slow here, it will catch. And we won't have any fuss with it. So there we go. All right, now put some thread sealant on there. I'm using this Permatex blue. It's sort of the medium strength. It's not going to lock it in here forever, but it will make sure that it doesn't leak. Just putting a little drop on either side doesn't take much, and this is a tapered brass thread, so it shouldn't leak to begin with, but just in case. That's as far as it's going to go. And back it up just a tiny bit. Make sure that's lined up with our sticker, and it is. So, all right. Now, what should we do next? Let's keep going on here. We'll put the collar on. I think I may have mentioned earlier, in the intro I was saying this was made by AGM. Some of these were made by AGM, American Gas Machines, but this, once I got the paint off of it, and it was all, I think it was all just chipped and corroded along the bottom here, so I couldn't see where it was made, but it was made in British Hong Kong. So that means this is one of the Sears lanterns J.C. Higgins that was made by Unimet. Now that we've got that on, let's put our generator together and make sure our cleaning needle is straight. And we'll just hook it into, raise this up as high as it'll go. Get it into the claw there, drop that down And then we will carefully slide that needle in. And I can see it poking up and down through the hole, so we're good there. And we'll just tighten this up. Now we need to put the burner together. Set that aside. We've got our plate. This is the top, this is the bottom. We've got our two upright supports and we've got our retaining bolt. And let's see, we've got 4 little brass nuts, and there we go. So let's start. We'll thread in our mixing chamber. I don't know how far I'm not going to tighten this locking screw all the way. I'm just going to put it in there because we may need to adjust this up or down once we've got this put together. And I noted that these brass nuts, when we took it apart, were all the way up at the top, which I have not seen before, but that's how this thing was put together, so we'll put it back together that way. Worst thing that happens is it doesn't provide enough clearance for the globe. Now, how do we put this back together? We've got a couple of holes here. We can actually see the holes that were used originally because they've got the marks from the nuts. So if we go that way, our generator comes up here. This is how we know what's lined up right. Well, this lighting hole goes off to the right of the front, and then our generator is going to come up straight into this, and this guy is going to come up to the side. So, like that. So that's how we know we've got this lined up properly. So, just screw these nuts on the bottom side. Pain because of that lip. I may just have to take the direction disc off of another Higgins lantern I've got and scan it and print out a decal on some clear water slide paper and see if that will make that knob look better, but that's a project for another day. Oh, there we go. Okay, So there we go. I'm going to screw this up further, just so that it's out of the way, and then I can screw it back down as necessary once we get this on here. So generator through this opening. And this guy sits on top of the generator. And then this goes through it, and I need to get all of that lined up and tight. So I think we're good to put this screw, or this nut, bolt rather, in. All right, after much fussing around, I concluded that someone obviously took this apart before, and they screwed these nuts all the way up to the top of these uprights, and that just wasn't giving us enough space to work here. When this mixing chamber is screwed all the way, or it's screwed too far up, it wants to sit in an angle like this. You can see this is still a little bit wonky. This may just be a difference between AGM and Unimet tolerances. I don't know. Yeah, the machining up here isn't as nice as it should be. So I've never had this problem with an AGM. But everything's going together now. Our collar is centered, which I couldn't get it centered before. I think this is all going to be snug enough. Tight enough, and everything looks good around here. Scratched our paint a little bit, unfortunately. So let me see if I can unscrew this just a bit, just to get that tight. I'd rather it not leak air around there. So I think we're good. So now let's tighten this guy. And there we go. Fuel cap. Got our 3 pieces, and we've got a new gasket. I burned this out. I'll put a link up here to my video on how to do that. Everything you need to know about fuel caps. Put a new gasket in there. Put that on. Screw the outer piece on. It's nice and tight. And our pump. Got our pump cap, our spring, this little backing plate washer. Got the leather itself, and instead of the cylindrical deal, they put a little washer on there, and then got a nut that holds it all together. So it doesn't fall apart down in the bottom. And we've got our check valve. I did manage to get this out because I was having issues with it sealing. So I pulled that out. Now, this isn't quite the right thread pitch, but I think I can use it. It's just grabbing onto the threads a little bit, so I can put it down in here. and get it in the hole. Gently get it started. And let's see if I can then. There we go. Now I can use my big screwdriver. Get it in that slot. Get it tight. And now we want to put some oil on here. That brass, the spring-loaded brass deal helps a lot with these AGM style pumps. Even when they're not oiled, they still work pretty well. So I'm using 3-in-1 oil. You can pretty much use any oil you want, just don't use a vegetable-based oil because they kind of go rancid and get hard and they'll make a mess. Most of these manufacturers originally use neat's foot oil, and you can use that. Cleaning the excess off. And get the hole lined up. All right, mantles. I'm going to put on a Peerless 24A. These AGM style singles, you'll want to use a fairly good sized mantle. Some of them will even probably push a 111, but the ideal mantles for these would be a Coleman 99 or a Peerless 24A. They're sort of the mid-range mantles. If you put a number 21 on here, the small ones that you see on double mantle lanterns, it's just not going to be large enough. It'll overburn, and the biggest issue is you need heat down here by the generator. This is kind of the design problem with these. They take a while to heat up, and if the mantle is too small and it's sitting up here, the heat doesn't get down to the generator. So, and I think before I put the rest of it on, I'm going to go ahead and burn in this mantle. So because this is resting down on the bottom, I'm going to start burning it up here at the top. And that should lift it up. They're always fun to watch. Now we can burn in the bottom. Okay, let's put our globe on. This is a replacement Coleman globe for a 200, same size as the originals. Got our the bail on first, since you can do that with this style of vent. This slides right over the bail, and then it's centered. Let's see how we got that. That might be a little crooked. There we go. So, there we go. That's all together. Let me gas this up and we'll be ready to fire it. We're all gassed up. Let's add some pressure. So unscrew the pump until it disengages from the check valve. Should be good. Don't hear any leaks. So we'll add some flame. Looks like we're just about there. This design does take longer for the generator to heat up. And of course, losing some air out of the fount in the process, so I'll add more. I think we're good. No fuel leaks here. I think we're doing pretty well. The mantle's brightened up some. It's running nicely. I think it looks great. Let me cut the lights. That looks pretty good. Well, we're done. I've got both of them together here for the first time. I think this is the first time since I've been filming these videos that I've actually done a matched stove and lantern set. And so, like I said, it was a lot of fun. I learned some things. I'm assuming that this valve down here is an AGM design, not a Sears. I could be wrong, but whatever engineer came up with that, I hope he got fired or someone had a stern talking with him, because this is a really dumb design, having to turn this auxiliary knob down here. But other than that, you know, I think these are both pretty good. Both of them in Sears lineup were in the good range. Sears usually had a good, better, best. There was the cheap one, and then the middle one, and then the high-end one. And both of these were on the lower price end, so they were the good. But you know, both of them, even the Unimet made lantern, it's a decent lantern. It runs well. The stove runs really well, and so I'm happy with that. What did I learn? This was the first time I've used that expensive VHT paint, and I'm not so sure that I would do that again. The only reason I used it was to get the right color match, and I think we did hit the mark on the color. But it's about 3 times or 2.5 to 3 times as expensive as you know, a Rust-Oleum or Krylon can, and unfortunately the Rust-Oleum Hammerite or hammered blue paint seems to be discontinued. I don't think they ever sold it up here anyways, so I had to go with this expensive stuff, and as expensive as it is, it doesn't go very far. I could have done this whole project probably with 1.5 cans of Rust-Oleum, and it took 3 cans of VHT, so just a heads up. It's expensive, and it does not go very far, although it is really nice paint to work with. It's very forgiving. Even when you get a little sag here and there, it almost completely disappears. So I'm really happy with that. So anyways, again, this has been great, and I'll see you next time for the next project.